hello guys, I just want to introduce a person called Doug Bell, and we met online and in person as well like a few weeks ago, and we had a very good conversation about business processes, bottlenecks, data analytics, which is my side. And at the end of the conversation, I was like, Doug, let's record it and let's just try to repeat the conversation to people so we can share what we know, and maybe it can help someone from business industries like service-based businesses, or maybe even e-commerce. So that's Doug. I will let him introduce himself to you. He's going to do it better.
No, brilliant. Thanks, David. Yeah, I think that's a good summary of where we've met and what we've done. It's probably helpful just to give a bit of background on where I've come from, so that we can try and explain a bit of where my experience is from and how we've ended up where we are. So a long time ago, my first career started back in recruitment. So selling catering recruitment, wasn't allowed to use a phone, so just knocking on doors and just learning some sales skills by interacting with people face to face. I then moved slightly away from recruitment to try and help people. So it was more in a healthcare space. So we were still providing people, but to try and help grow a healthcare business. That was actually venture capitalist owned. So it was there to try and drive the growth ready for a sale. I found that I really enjoyed working with people in operations. I then moved to the sales side of it, head of sales, to lead the sales there, until the point where that business was eventually sold. I actually moved across to the probation service when that was privatized. So that was effectively taking all of the way the service was delivered in the public sector and then move it into the private sector. I led on the organizational redesign, setting up a professional services center. So that was literally the letters from the first time people leave prison all the way to recall to prison. So I started to understand the basic principles around doing the mapping from one side of things all the way through to the other. I then got the chance to work in a prison, which was slightly unusual environment to say the least. So I had to set up 6 workshops within the prison, which had to be commercially viable operations. And the idea was you kind of get the men employment on release. So that was 6 workshops. I think it was 520 men. I then left that company, set up my own consultancy, and about 5 months later, the pandemic happened. So I ended up working for somebody else to try and help them get people back into employment after the pandemic. So the biggest one I worked on was a £500 million contract to get 1 million people back into work, and that was set up in just 8 weeks. So I was looking at all the recruitment of the staff, all the standard operating procedures, and to try and get them out. And now I've kind of moved to a position where I really want to help smaller companies to really take the knowledge and experience I've got to impact that and move it forward.
That's amazing. And it's so interesting because when I was 18, I just started my own business, and I never had a chance to work with inside the huge businesses and working on that scale. So it was a very long process for me to actually, it took me like 15 years to actually now start working with a bit better clients. So probably you gained even more experience by working for someone than me being the entrepreneur of 2 businesses, which is quite weird to say. You know what I mean? It
yes.
feels, yeah.
But I think there's 2 parts of it, though, because you get the corporate side, which has a structure, and so therefore you might have some more resources available to you. But it also doesn't allow you to kind of mold and change and do the things that you really want to do to help the customers. Whereas an entrepreneur, I imagine you've had that flexibility to really choose what you want to do and help people in the way you want to do it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I made lots of mistakes, and I wish actually when I look back at my path, I'm always thinking, if I had to do it again, I would just work for someone for 5 years or few years, actually gain some basic knowledge and then start the business. So what you did is actually quite good. And I'm interested, why did you shift? Why did you go from working in a positions like that to actually having your own consultancy and working for yourself? What's the reason?
So if I'm being brutally honest, when I first started out, the aim was to be able to get myself a reasonable lifestyle and find an industry where I could earn reasonable money. So that's why I chose recruitment. And I didn't want to be stuck in an office every day. As I moved through my career, I realized that just earning money doesn't necessarily give you much satisfaction. And therefore, I wanted to start to help people. And as I've grown, so I've worked in healthcare sector, the probation sector, / prisons, and then employability, because it was always trying to help people better their lives. And I like the idea of being able to impact people's lives. So I've really enjoyed that. But I've got to the point now where I've become almost one step removed. So as much as it's great, I've helped so many people get back into employment. I want to start working with individuals again so I can see the impact I can have and really help them drive their growth so that they can get the success. And I can use the skills and experience I've got to help others.
That's cool. I think it's way more, like a business like that is way more approachable. You can see the changes, and it's quite, I think it's nice environment to be in as well, because whatever you implement, you don't have to go through a lot of procedures and and all the documentation and processes. You can actually, the smaller the business is, the faster you can implement the change. That's what I feel within my businesses. I sometimes meet with my team and we talk for like 2 hours, and the next day the business is like 3-4% more optimized in certain areas just because of one conversation we had, and we just agreed on it. And from now on, we working differently. And when you have like a huge businesses you work with, probably it takes a bit longer time because of all of the documentations and the amount of people. But you did something amazing within like 6 or 8 weeks. You had to let's get back to it because I'm interested. So can you explain what you actually did in this short time?
Okay. So post-pandemic, obviously a lot of people weren't able to retain their jobs because the industries went down. So I was tasked with making sure we mobilize that whole contract. So to give you an idea of scale, so we recruited, trained, and security vetted 458 people in just 8 weeks. So we had done a profile of how do we recruit that many people and what processes have to go in place. So we had to use the BAU process and almost put that to one side. It got to the point where all the way through to the head of that business was interviewing. So the country leadership team, all of the senior management team, and everyone beneath was all conducting interviews, evening, weekends, days, to make sure that we hit those numbers. And it was amazing, the pride and the drive that people had to make sure that we succeeded, because we had such a goal. And one of the things with delivering a contract implementation is you've got a very fixed time period. You can flex things in between, but you have to achieve it within that period. Yeah. And if you put a target on something, and that's where I can take that same principle, apply it to a business and say, right, what do we want to achieve? And then agree how we get there in a short period of time. And you'll be amazed how fast you can implement things. The other thing that I'm quite fortunate with, I managed to take complex tasks and make them quite simple, because I want to just take it one step at a time, because you could easily get overwhelmed with something of that size and scale. You can imagine there is many, many, many things going wrong 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day. And the other thing is, where there might be a slight crack in a business and you think, oh, I better fix that later on, with this, almost within hours, if not days, they became huge problems. And so you had to be able to spot where those things are. And I've been able to do that quite well now.
So it's not like you set the strategy and you have a strategy for each day or each week of the 8 weeks, and you just follow the strategy 100% as it is on a paper, and it's all as planned. Because I feel like it's you have a lot of things that always go different ways than you plan, if you know what I mean. The more humans we have involved, the more changes can happen and unexpected things. So probably, so how important was the strategy compared to how important was actually being there every single day and improving the strategy as you go? Do you think like the both are equally important, or is it better to focus on one approach, which is like more active one, where actually when you work inside when you create a strategy as you go, or it's better to do it like a holistic approach when you do it before? What's better?
So I think there's two elements to that. So the first one is, if you don't have a target and you are not clear on what you're aiming for, you will never achieve that target, because you may not know. Your stats are pretty much unlikely to know if you're not clear. And the best analogy I can give you, I mean, I'm not a particular football fan, but if you imagine a football pitch that you took away the goals and you just had to keep trying to play each other, at the end of that game, both teams would be equally as tired. One would know whether they've achieved the outcome, one wouldn't. And so it's really important that people know what that target is and what you're aiming for. The other part is, how do you move towards it? So this is where you have to have a solution-focused approach. So give people the remit, give them the challenge of what they need to achieve within a set boundary, and encourage them. If people go wrong, let's look at it, let's work through it, let's fix it. Don't do anything that's going to put your business at risk or, health and safety. But you'll be amazed how much people can achieve if you give them that freedom to go forward and take those calculated risks and just push forward. If your team can see how much they can achieve, the energy goes up, their ability to continue to drive, and you will, from what I've seen in my experience, it's quite surprising how much change you can have. To come back to your original question there a bit more, you do need the strategy, but you also have to accept that life will happen. You might suddenly land a massive client 3 weeks in, and therefore you have to kind of change and pivot. So you've always got to be flexible, but without a target, you'll never achieve. Yeah,
and they both equally important, I would say, from my point of view. And from what you say, it feels like you feel the same, that it's like it's just two important things that you need to consider when you plan and when you execute. So why I actually talk to you on my LinkedIn and why I want to share it with people is because I realized that I'm in the data analytics business, which is actually marketing data analytics.
Yeah.
And when it comes to a service-based businesses, I feel like in a lot of cases, the business structure is like marketing is the first thing that actually attracts the customer. And then you have sales of people that actually close the sale and the processes that close the sale, or even go through the sale because you need to advise the customer and things like that. And then the important part as well is actually the delivery of the service. Because without that, we just selling scams to people. So of course, I always put a lot of... but if you just focus on the delivery of the service and you don't focus on sales and you don't focus on the marketing, there are big chances that you can be the best within the business, but no one will actually come to you. And I just try to... It's so hard to actually solve the problem like that, talking about a lot of different industries, because every industry is different. But I just want to go through the case and explain people what we do and how you take over, for example.
Yeah.
So someone can actually optimize their business based on what I say. Maybe it can help you guys. So can I just talk about it for a second, Doug?
Yeah, of course.
So when it comes to data analytics within the marketing, like you talked about the goals and things like that, they called KPIs. And of course, that's what first we should set within the business, which is, for example, how many leads I would like to acquire each month, for example, or each week, or like how many visitors I need to the website, and like a sub KPIs as well, how many impressions and things like that. So putting these KPIs in place are actually one of the first thing you do in order to start improving the marketing. And in order to put them in place, you also need to measure them. So actually setting up some sort of measurements that even you can do it yourself or use like a certain software, because you can actually call your customers and ask about the entire journey, which is very inconvenient. But you can start measuring the marketing even without any software, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So we put that in place to actually measure, and then it allows us to actually perform some A/B testing within the marketing. So we can actually, for example, create an advert with seven different artworks, and you can actually measure how much time people spend per each artwork on your website, and then how many leads you get out of each campaign, and you can actually then optimize your spend in the right places. And if it's done carefully, it takes probably like, a 6 months, a year sometimes, depends on the case. It takes a long time to optimize things like that, because you need to spend the time to actually collect the data, just wait for it as well, and perform the tests. But once you do it, there is a chance you may actually start getting more people approaching you. And then what I had this few times with my clients, and I noticed that that's where the next bottleneck happens, which is actually sales and the processes. For example, how to convert the person that calls or emails you to become a customer, how fast to respond and stuff like that. So Doug, I think that's where you take over. Is that correct? Is that what you can help with?
It does. But if I could just ask a couple of questions. So when you're setting this up, do you help people to understand the budget and how much it costs for each lead and each customer?
Yeah, collecting the data allows to do a lot of things with it. It is optimizing the campaign. It is actually calculating the CAC, which is customer acquisition cost. So actually it allows business to it helps to improve the pricing within the business. Because if it costs you, if actually acquiring a customer costs you 50% of the price that your customer pays, probably you have no profit margin within the business, which is often the case, that businesses make a lot of work, but at the end of the year, when you do P&L, profit and loss statements, you look at the papers and you're like, oh my God, I'm not even hitting the profits, which is quite often. That's why even big businesses have problems with it. So of course, calculating that is one of the benefits of what we do. And I love these metrics.
Yeah. You can see you've got passion for it. It's really good. And I think it's such an important part of delivering with your business, because otherwise you can become quite a busy fool if you're not careful and you don't know where to put the money in and what returns you're getting. So
I was there, 60K in unpaid VAT, which was extremely painful. And I was there 3-4 years ago. And within my first digital agency business with around 8-10 people on board at that time. And that's how I fell in love in the data, because that's what helped me actually solve the problem. But let's focus on the sales as well, because I think that's where the problem is. I had some cases when we had phone calls and emails that we generated within the proper strategy for the clients, and they also need to know how can they optimize the process, what they should look at, and how to optimize the sales process within the business. Do you have any tips?
Yeah, okay. So it depends on what kind of what that endpoint is. But if we just frame sales for a second, so quite often people get panicked around selling things, and they almost feel nervous about creating an offer. But ultimately, if your product or service is going to benefit that individual, you need to think of it as sales is effectively service. So, interesting, I did a video on this just recently. If you were going to go and buy your favorite car and you'd saved up, you're really excited, and you got to the forecourt and the salesperson was there just saying, yeah, it's an okay car. If you really want it, I guess you could have it. It will do what you want. And you had someone who was really deflated. Well, if you really want to pay that much for it, you might be able to get something else. You would find that your feeling inside would almost doubt your own excitement and whether that is the right thing for you. We sometimes forget that the leads that you're generating are there to be able to bring customers to you, because they are interested in the product or service that you've got. So you should put that on forward.
I understand. And actually, it's someone who wants to buy from you. They as motivated to buy, like you are motivated to make a sale. It's like a win-win situation. Of course, if you have a lot of cold calling and cold email strategy, that's where the problem happens, because you are approaching people that don't really want to buy at certain time. And I think that's why the marketing is important, because you don't want to, it's better to attract people to you that have a need and also sometimes build the need within the marketing funnel, like, awareness, interest and stuff like that before you actually collect the lead. And then I think the sales process, it's quite easy compared to approaching someone that never heard about you. What do you think?
100%. And they will be interested. There's 2 points that I would just raise though. One, you must put the offer out there for people to have the opportunity to purchase it. I'll give you one more analogy actually. If you were in a supermarket and you went to, or in a shop where you wanted to buy something and you got to the front and there were no checkouts, you would look around for a little while. Hopefully you would steal it, but you'd be then wanting to have something. But if there's no option to get it, eventually you would leave. So you have to think of it that you've got to create that checkout scenario so that people have the option to purchase what it is that you've offered. And the second part, which is the integrity thing, which for me is absolutely crucial, if that product or service isn't right for that person, you must make that clear that it's not right for them and explain why you believe that to be the case. And that's how you will get good, credible reputation within the marketplace, because you're not just selling it to anyone. You're making sure that you're qualifying that lead, that they're the right person and they will benefit from it. And then the follow-up on that is that you give the service or the product exactly as you've described, and that would build your reputation. So I can give you scripts around how you do it, but you have to have that mindset.
I love it. That's when I have people that knock my door. What I do is, if I know I'm not going to buy, I'm telling them this, which is painful sometimes, but I'm telling them straight away that I'm not going to purchase today. And I smile and I'm polite, but you know what? The conversation takes only 10 seconds and they can go to a next person that actually want to make a purchase. And I saved someone's time and I also saved my time. And I think that's the best approach. It's better to match. So actually, I think it's called prospecting. I don't know if that's a word that you use for it. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is.
So actually the prospecting is, I would say it is quite important to actually, if you even do cold calling and cold emails, which happens within some industries. I'm not saying that's the worst channel to do. But if you find the right person that has a need for the service, there is nothing wrong with cold emailing them, in my opinion. If it's matching, that's what you said is actually correct. And I see this problem in a lot of businesses. And I had the same problem within my business when I started it, because I was so young. I wanted to sell to anyone and just to build the cash flow and to make my business successful. Yeah. And that was costing me a lot. Even refunds, for example, I had to sometimes, in order to save my business from a negative review, I had to just, refund the money to the customer and agree that it was my mistake that I sold I sold a service to someone that was not a good match.
Yeah. I think on that bit, so you need to understand who is your ideal client and what is your solution statement. So even if it's cold calling, hopefully that is in the market that you know that you want, and you're speaking to the person that would benefit from your product. They might not know this yet, but as long as you ring them and you make that offer and you just give them the example as to how that will benefit them, they have the option to say yes or no. The same as your analogy with someone coming to the door. Ultimately that might be, a service that you've been thinking about doing for, a long period of time. And, there's often the cook ones, I can't remember what they're called, but when they come in and they provide you with all the ingredients, it might be something you're talking about at the time and think it's perfect. Yeah. If it's not, then, you waste a while and send them on the way.
That's right. And you've been talking about the checkout a few minutes ago. And recently I heard that when the Amazon started the e-commerce website, it took like 8-9 clicks to actually make a purchase.
Yeah.
And now it takes 0 clicks because you can actually ask Alexa to make a purchase for you. So that's why Amazon is actually growing so fast in the last 10-20 years. I don't know even when they started, but the thing is that optimizing a sale is actually gonna reduce the customer acquisition costs, because if we generate, let's say, 10 leads and you can convert 2 leads out of it instead of to become a customer instead of 1, then you have a better lower customer acquisition costs. That's why marketing and sales should work together, like we talking today. I think that's and I don't think, when I spoke to my marketing friend a week ago, and he told me that the sales department within the business and the marketing departments, they're not really equal. It's more like the marketing was below the sales, and they've been not putting enough attention, and they've been not listening to the marketing people. And I think that's what can actually stop business from growing. What do you think? Is that a bottleneck?
Yeah, absolutely. So you need to be able to look at your ratios and effectively the data. So where are the potential bottlenecks? And ideally, what you want to do is preempt as many of these as possible. So you understand how many calls does it take to get a sale? How many sales do you require to achieve your outcome? And then you can build the ratios of how much staff you need. And then you can start looking at what are the trigger points for when to start to recruit the staff, so they're on board, they're trained, and they're able to deliver the service to the customer. We often just get caught in one area and we just focus on one thing at a time. And so therefore you might speak to yourself about the data analytics and you get all these leads coming through. But if you haven't preempted what's that next step and you're thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead, you get all these sales leads, and I can see that will have a detrimental effect because you then can't deliver to all of those. Or you can get the sales, but you can't get the service.
Even if you send a quote like 5 days later instead of next day, I think it gives sometimes, it depends, of course, what's the industry, because sometimes it takes 5 days to send a quote. But if it's an easy one, you don't want to wait a very long time to actually receive the quote, because it's an impression that customer will wait even longer to have the service delivered. And I see that when I want to purchase some sort of services for my house, construction and stuff like that, it's actually important for me, the first approach, after I ask for the quote, I want to see how well and how fast they can actually respond to me. And things like that you actually can optimize within the business. You're doing it by actually talking with the staff, with the business owner. How do you actually do it?
Yeah, but I think part of that is trying to automate as much as possible. If you've got your ideal client, you should know roughly what those costs are for each of those clients, because the service should be relatively similar. And therefore, you can just send those out quickly. The other thing that people look at is, if somebody doesn't buy, they might still become a warm lead. But if you follow up to understand what was the reason you didn't want to purchase today, and you have people do that can actually get a lot of customers back, because it shows that you care and they actually genuinely want to help that person. So failed sales are often a brilliant way to get people back on board. Even if they don't say yes then, it will leave them with a positive impression of your business. And if they said to you, oh, it's because the quote was really slow, you can understand, okay, that's fine. This is how we normally do it. And it's great feedback. But it might make the opportunity to sell again.
You know what? I keep a track of people that never purchased from me, but they asked us for a quote. Because we sometimes been late with the quote. It happens when, the business is small. It's only a few people now in my second data analytics business. And sometimes we are busy. It happens. And I keep track of the people because I may come back to them in a year time. And that's my sales process as well, Because if they had a need once, there is a chance that they may have a need again, for example. Or maybe my price was too big for them, for example, at that stage. We have cases like that. And Another way around, probably my price could be too small for some sort of different size businesses, and I'm building my strategy as I go because it's only like 1 or 2 years old business, so you know how it is. Yeah, that's amazing. So,
but just on that bit then, so I think it's always important to be able to, if they're happy with who they've got and what they're doing right now, in recruitment terms, it's called second tiering. So if they've got their preferred supplier, you just say, if they're ever struggling with a specific need, just try us. See what you think. Then therefore you might have 2 businesses you could work with and see which one works. So don't just turn one off and the other one on. Try me, and then you can see how good I really am.
Yeah, and you know what I also noticed with my customer, that we had, because we improved the marketing a bit, we had the leads coming in, but these were different kind of leads for a different similar service, but not exactly the same service that they offer. So actually the market was ready for it, and there was a big demand. And I was talking to the customer, I was like, why you don't actually spend a few days to build the service, because it's very similar to what you offer already. And that's where actually a guy like you can help, because I'm a data analytics guy, and I don't want to involve too much in building the sales processes within the business. But if it's my business, I would be definitely launching this second service, which is similar to the first one, because we had like every single day we had someone asking for the service, so it was a big demand, and I think that customer till this day is waiting with it, and maybe it's more complicated than I think, because you know, to hire someone new or to build a new process around the service, you need someone to actually look at it and help you probably, or you need to spend a lot of self-reflecting time, you know, how to build a service like that.
It can be, but I suppose this is where you lean on your own experience. And for me, I find those things relatively straightforward because I've done them on such a big scale. But there's 3 elements that I generally focus on. So you would have the strategy. So you need to know what the target is that you're going for. Sales, and in essence, the analytics. So how are you going to generate all of the leads, and then how are you going to close those, and the delivery of those, and then leadership. If you are a relatively small business, you might not be able to manage the leadership very easily when there's only a handful of people. If you don't get a solid foundation, as your business grows, all of those things will start to become problematic. And therefore, if you get the foundations right, you can scale much quicker. Mm-hmm. And so those processes are, for me, I find them relatively straightforward, but that's only because of the experience I've had. But if you follow them, I found it worked in operations, in sales, in transformation, in contract implementation. They're the same principles that apply. And that's where I love seeing that change, because it's very quick and easy to implement them and then start to catapult people's businesses.
Yeah, and I just want to also ask you one more thing about prospecting, which is, because we've been talking about it, like a good match, who's a good match for a certain service, and I'm interested, who's a good match for your service? So can you tell me a bit about your target audience and who benefits the most out of your help?
So the majority of people that benefit from my support is a business that is ready to scale. So they've got an established market. They know exactly who they're going to target, or they need some support to identify who they're going to target, but they really want to scale up and they're ready to go. So they can afford to recruit additional staff when we need them, and they want to see the accelerated growth come in a short period of time. People that are in that mindset and they're ready to do that, they're absolutely perfect. If you've not long started and you're struggling to get things in place, and there's only 1, maybe 2 people, then I'm probably not the right person for you, because it will take too long to do that. But if you've got a small number of people and you're ready to scale, that is my ideal client that I can help. In the service-based industry, I've not really done a huge amount of e-commerce, but service. So it's either with people or products. So they're generally the 2 areas in which I would focus.
That's cool. And I think it's much better to work with businesses that already have some sales processes in place, instead of trying to build a sales process from nothing, because it really takes a lot of time it's a lot of testing, see what works, and actually you can definitely achieve better results when you work with people that already have things you can look at, analyze, optimize, and put some KPIs in place. I think that's what businesses lack at certain size, like, 5 to 20 employees. They're not putting enough energy and time into looking at KPIs. But then when they look at the finances, they might be disappointed, for example. But, so things like that. And I believe that you might be profitable for some businesses. So, for example, I'm not trying to sell you guys his service, but I met people that try to advise businesses a lot of times, and they're not really they don't have as technical approach and like a growth-oriented like Doug. That's why I wanted to introduce you to my LinkedIn. So definitely, I feel like you can really help people, and I think like, it can be a profitable business for them. Do you offer anything like test consultations, or like things that someone can actually have a 1 hour with you or half an hour? How it works?
Yeah, exactly that. So generally I'll have a discovery call or a strategy call so I can understand exactly who your ideal client is, what your target audience is, where you are in terms of your growth, and what your aspirations are. At the end of that, if it's something that we could work together on and it works for both of us, then we can look at a variety of different programs. So I've got some where it's almost just training to support people to allow them to grow. And then I've also got some where I can do more of that work for you. So if you are focused on what you need to do, but you just need somebody to manage the sales or build the sales process, then I can do that. And I can also look at some of the emails and the strategy. So yes is the answer. I generally do a 1 hour, up to 1 hour discovery call. And then at the end of that, we just see if it works for me and works for you. If it does, we take it forward. If it doesn't, I wish you well, and I'll work with somebody else.
I've got the same model. Like, we offer an audit that we look at what kind of data you collect, and if it's valuable data or what you're missing with your data collection. And again, it's not costing people anything, and we're not even pushing them to make a purchase. So they can only gain a lot of insights from it. I think that's part of the sales process. And even if customer is not a good match, at least we can check if customer can check if he would like to work with us, and we can check if he would like to work with the customer as well, because we're not taking any customers like we used to. I told you about that before. So I think we're gonna be finishing soon. Do you have...
Just that last bit, sorry. So one thing that I would say, if I'm not the right person to help, then I might be able to know somebody else, and vice versa. It often happens that, it's not the right time for us, but you might know another client. So it often builds quite a good network as to once you start to have those discovery calls to see how you can benefit each other. This is exactly how me and David have obviously ended up on this call, is because we've seen that we can add value to each other. And so that's how I would ideally want to grow, to really make sure that you add that value and we support each other on our growth.
Yeah, me and Doug, we don't like when the business is staying flat, and we just want to be like some of the jigsaw puzzles in your business journey and help move from the flat line, and let's keep expanding. And I think as an entrepreneur, that's what gives me lots of joy. I don't like to have a business which makes the same profits every single month or a year. The competition is always strong and it's growing, and you don't want to stay flat within your business. You need to grow. Actually, it's not like you want to grow. You need to grow in order to stay in the marketplace. Do you have the same feeling?
If you don't grow, you're dying. Effectively, you will go backwards. And any business that doesn't want to change and move with the times, you will get left behind. I think we've got an industry, a lifestyle now where everything is instant. Whether that's on your phone, whether it's on the TV, everything is now expected to happen immediately. And sometimes, life isn't quite like that. But that's where we have to try and make sure that we are providing those rapid responses and helping people to achieve.
And I feel like you helped actually to optimize my business a bit just by talking with you for 45 minutes, because I came up with some of ideas of, I was imagining like at some point I will need to build a sales team within my business. And, it just made me think about a bit more like futuristic approach, like in a year's time or 6 months' time. And I need to start thinking about these things. And you just made me realize that, I can't have a very narrow approach now, because a lot of things are going on within the business. Of course, I need to have a holistic approach of where I'm going and what's going to be the next step. And you just made me think about it. So I hope someone that listened to us for the last, I hope someone actually made it to the end. If they did, thank you guys for listening to us. And I hope you have your own ideas now what to improve. And feel free to contact Doug if you want to, as he's a very friendly person to work with. And as you can see, it's an easy person to talk to.